Centuries ago, the Crithian merchants had demanded tribute from their homeworld. When the Vryn refused, the council declared them outlaws and drove them into the dead zone. Chieftain Gorax met Alina in a ruined station that drifted between dead stars. His warriors surrounded him, weapons ready, trust absent from their eyes. "Humans," Gorax said. The words sounded like a curse. "The council's newest victims. Why should the Vryn care about your suffering? You were part of that council. You voted on laws that oppressed us." Alina did not flinch from his accusation. "You're right. We were part of the council. We believed their lies about justice and equality. We were fools. And now we understand what the council really is. A machine that protects the powerful and crushes everyone else. We want to build something different." Gorax studied her for a long moment. His glowing eyes revealed nothing. "What do you offer?" "Alliance. We share technology, resources, and intelligence. We protect each other. And when we're strong enough, we make the council answer for what they've done." The council is vast. Their fleets number in the millions. What can exiles do against such power? Alina leaned forward. "The council thinks we're dead. They've forgotten about us. That's our greatest weapon. While they celebrate their victory, we grow stronger in the shadows. When we strike, they won't see us coming." Gorax was silent for a long time. Then, slowly, he extended his hand in the human gesture of agreement. "The Vryn have long memories. We remember every wrong done to us. Perhaps together, we can collect those debts." The alliance grew. The Shalkai came next, an insectoid species whose homeworld had been conquered by the Velthari centuries ago. They were fierce warriors who had never stopped fighting, even in exile. They brought military knowledge and a burning hatred for the Dominion. Then came the Moravi, a race of engineers whose crime had been inventing technology that threatened Crithian trade monopolies. They brought technical skills that complemented human ingenuity. One by one, the forgotten and discarded species of the galaxy found their way to Haven Prime. They came with anger, with grief, with desperate hope. They came because humanity offered something no one else had. It's a chance to matter again. Admiral Chen watched the growing community from his command center. What had started as a desperate evacuation was becoming something else entirely. An alliance. A movement. Perhaps even an empire. "They're calling us the Collective," his aide reported. "The Haven Collective." Chen nodded slowly. "Then that's who we are. The forgotten ones. The exiled ones. The ones they threw away." He turned to look at a star chart that showed council space. Somewhere out there, High Counselor Merrick's was sleeping peacefully, confident that the human threat was ended. "Enjoy your peace while it lasts," Chen whispered to the distant stars. "We're coming." 5 years would pass before the council heard the name Haven Collective. By then, it would be too late to stop what humanity had built. 5 years had passed since the exile. The Galactic Council had forgotten about humanity. That was their first mistake. Haven Prime had transformed from a desperate refugee camp into a thriving city carved from stone and metal. 17 stations now orbited the dying red star, connected by shuttle routes and communication networks. The population had doubled through births and new arrivals, exiles from a dozen species, who had heard whispers of a place where the forgotten could find hope. Admiral Marcus Chen walked through the central plaza of Haven Prime. Children ran past him, laughing and playing. Some were human. Others were Vryn, Shalkai, Moravi. They played together without caring about species or origin. This was the future Chen had dreamed of. A community built on shared struggle rather than ancient hatreds. But Chen had not forgotten the past, and he had not forgiven. Dr. Yuki Tanaka's research had produced miracles. The precursor technology had been decoded, adapted, and integrated into human vessels. The new ships were faster than anything in Council space. Their shields could absorb energy weapons and redirect the power back at attackers. Most importantly, their hulls could be rendered invisible to all known sensor systems. Chen called them the Ghost Fleet. His son, Lieutenant Commander David Chen, led these phantom warriors. David was 30 years old, born on Earth, but raised in exile. He had his father's tactical mind and his mother's fierce determination. He also had a personal score to settle with the Council. The convoy is approaching the Crithian border, David reported from his ship, the Silent Blade. 12 merchant vessels. Minimal escort. Admiral Chen studied the tactical display. Contents. Rare minerals, bound for Velthary shipyards. Enough resources to build 50 warships. Then make sure those resources never arrive. Standard protocol. No casualties unless necessary. David smiled. Understood, Father. The raid was over in minutes. The Ghost Fleet appeared from nowhere, disabled the escort ships with precision strikes, transferred the cargo to their own vessels. By the time Council reinforcements arrived, the humans had vanished like smoke in the wind. This was not the first raid. Over the past 2 years, the Ghost Fleet had struck dozens of convoys, military outposts, and supply depots across Council space. They never stayed to fight. They never left survivors who could identify them. The Council blamed pirates, rival factions, and equipment malfunctions. They never suspected humans. High Counselor Merrix of the Velthary Dominion sat in his palace on Velthar Prime and felt something he had not felt in years: fear. Explain this to me again, he demanded. His advisors cowered before his golden throne. How have we lost 37 convoys in 2 years? Pirates, High Counselor, one advisor offered. The dead zone breeds criminals. They must be raiding our border systems. Pirates with technology that outmatches our best warships. Pirates who leave no traces, no evidence, no witnesses. Merrix's voice rose to a roar. Find me answers. Real answers.
Us.
But answers were hard to find. The Ghost Fleet left nothing behind. Their attacks were surgical, precise, and perfectly timed. Someone was feeding them intelligence. But Merrix's spy networks could find no source. What Merrix did not know was that his own servants were betraying him. Elena Vasquez had spent 5 years building a network of informants across Council space. She found them among the oppressed, the overlooked, and the resentful. A Crithian accountant who hated his masters. A Velthary servant whose family had been executed for minor crimes. A communications officer who had watched her homeworld, stripped of resources to feed the Dominion's endless hunger. These informants passed secrets to the Haven Collective. Ship movements, patrol schedules, weakness in defenses. Every piece of information brought the day of reckoning closer. Alina now led the Collective's diplomatic council. She had grown harder in exile, her gentle nature replaced by cold determination. But she never forgot what they were fighting for. We're not building an army of conquest, she told the assembled representatives of the Exile Compact. 11 species had now joined the alliance, each bringing their own strengths and grievances. We're building an army of justice. When we strike the Council, we don't become what they are. We prove that a better way is possible. Rin Chieftain Corax nodded slowly. Fine words. But when the time comes, the Velthary will not surrender to fine words. They will fight. Then we make sure they cannot fight, Admiral Chen replied. We don't need to destroy their fleets. We need to destroy their ability to make war, shipyards, supply lines, communication networks. Cut those, and their empire falls apart. Shalkai war leader Trix clicked her mandibles in approval. A wise strategy. Strike the body, and the limbs become useless. The planning continued for months. Every detail was examined, every contingency considered. The Haven Collective could not afford mistakes. They would have one chance to reveal themselves, one chance to strike before the Council could respond. Meanwhile, the Ghost Fleet continued its shadow war. David Chen became a legend, whispered in fear across Council space. They called him the Phantom, a human ghost who appeared from nowhere and vanished into nothing. Bounties were placed on his head. Rewards were offered for any information about his fleet. None came. On the eve of the 5th anniversary of exile, Admiral Chen gathered his senior officers for a final briefing. The plan was ready. The fleet was ready. The alliance was ready. Tomorrow, we announce ourselves to the galaxy, Chen said. Tomorrow, The Council learns that humanity did not die in the dead zone. We grew stronger. We found allies. We built something they cannot break. He paused, looking at the faces around him. Human, Vryn, Shalkai, Moravi, so different, yet united by common cause. They exiled us because they feared what we might become. Tomorrow, we show them that their fear was justified. In his palace on Velthar Prime, High Counselor Merrick's finally received the intelligence report he had demanded. A Crithian spy had intercepted a fragment of communication from the dead zone. Just one word in the human language. Soon. Merrick stared at the word for a long time. Then he began to understand exactly what he had unleashed upon the galaxy. The sensor officer on Velthari. Border Station 12 blinked at his screen in confusion. Hundreds of contacts had appeared at the edge of detection range, flickering in and out like ghosts. He ran a diagnostic on his equipment, certain that something was malfunctioning. The diagnostic came back clean. "Commander," he called out, his voice trembling, "you need to see." This Commander Vethix crossed the control room with the slow dignity expected of a Velthari officer. He looked at the screen and felt his four hearts freeze in his chest. The ghost contacts were becoming solid. Hundreds of ships, then thousands materializing from nothing at the edge of Dominion space. "That's impossible," he whispered. "No fleet can hide from our sensors." The communication console crackled to life. A human face appeared on the screen, a face that no Velthari had seen in 5 years. "This is Admiral Marcus Chen of the Haven Collective," the human said calmly. "Your sensors are not malfunctioning. We are here, and we are no longer hiding." Commander Vethix reached for the alarm, but it was already too late. The first wave of missiles struck his station's shield generators. The second wave destroyed his weapons platforms. By the time the Velthari fleet received his distress signal, Border Station 12 was a drifting wreck. Its crew alive but helpless. The reckoning had begun. Admiral Chen's strategy was not built on destruction. It was built on precision. The Haven Collective fleet split into dozens of task forces, each with a specific target. They struck simultaneously across Velthari space, overwhelming the Dominion's ability to respond. Shipyards burned. Military supply depots were captured or destroyed. Communication relays were disabled, cutting off Velthari commanders from their central command. Within 72 hours, the same amount of time humanity had been given to evacuate. The Dominion's war machine was crippled. Lieutenant Commander David Chen led the assault on the Velthari's primary shipyard, a massive station that produced half the Dominion's warships. His ghost fleet appeared directly above the facility, bypassing all defensive lines. The Velthari commander, Admiral Sithax, was a veteran of 100 campaigns. He immediately recognized the impossible tactical position he was in. His defenses were designed to stop enemies approaching from outside, not enemies appearing from within. "Human vessels," Sithax transmitted, "you have achieved surprise. But my station holds 10,000 Velthari warriors. We will fight to the last soldier." David Chen's response was calm. "Admiral, I respect your courage. But I'm not here to kill your soldiers. I'm here to destroy this shipyard. Evacuate your people to the civilian sectors, and I give you my word, they will not be harmed." The word of a human. "Your species is guilty of war crimes."
"No, Admiral."
"My species was framed for crimes we didn't commit. Your High Counselor knows this. He orchestrated the false evidence himself. Ask him if you ever get the chance." Sithax was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, he gave the evacuation order. His warriors protested, but he overruled them. There was something in the human's voice that told him. This was not a bluff. The Ghost Fleet destroyed the shipyard with precise strikes, avoiding the civilian sectors completely. When it was over, David Chen transmitted one final message to the surviving Velthari. "Tell your people what happened here. Tell them that humans came with overwhelming force and chose mercy. Then ask yourself why your leaders didn't offer us the same choice." Across the galaxy, the news spread like wildfire. The humans had returned. They had weapons that could defeat Velthari technology, and they were not alone. The Shalkai Liberation Fleet struck their occupied homeworld with devastating efficiency. The Vrin reclaimed their ancient territories. Species that had suffered under council oppression for centuries steadily found hope that change was possible. The Crithian merchant lords, always practical, immediately sued for neutrality. They sent envoys to Admiral Chen with offers of cooperation. They had never truly hated humans, they explained. They simply followed profit, and the council had been profitable. Now the calculus had changed. Chen accepted their surrender in exchange for reparations and intelligence. The Crithians provided detailed information about Velthari military positions, political weaknesses, and the location of High Counselor Merrick's himself, while the military campaign continued. Alina Vasquez launched a different kind of attack. She hijacked the Council's primary broadcast network, the same network that had transmitted humanity's false guilty verdict 5 years ago. "Citizens of the galaxy," she announced. Her face appeared on screens across 1,000 worlds. "You were told that humanity committed terrible crimes. You were told that our exile was justice. You were lied to." She presented the evidence. Falsified quantum signatures that proved the Velthari had manufactured the attack on. Nexer 7. Recorded conversations between Merrick's and his conspirators, planning humanity's destruction. Testimony from council members who had been threatened into supporting the verdict. "The council is not a body of justice," Alina continued. "It is a tool of oppression, controlled by species who believe they have the right to decide who lives and who dies. Humanity learned this lesson in exile. We found others who had learned the same lesson. Together, we are ending this corrupt system." The broadcast ended, but its effects continued. On 100 worlds, citizens demanded answers from their governments. On a dozen more, oppressed populations rose up against council-backed regimes. The empire built on lies was crumbling. High Counselor Merrick's watched the chaos from his palace on Velthar Prime. His advisors urged him to negotiate, to offer concessions, to find some way to preserve Velthari power. He refused. "Humans are vermin," he declared. "They may have won battles, but they cannot defeat the Dominion itself. They will never set foot on sacred Velthari soil." But even as he spoke these words, Merrick's knew they were hollow. The human fleet was approaching. His defenses were shattered. His allies had abandoned him. The day of judgment was coming, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the Resilience and watched Velthar Prime grow larger on the viewscreen. The blue-green planet was beautiful, its cities gleaming like jewels on its surface. He had the power to destroy it all. His weapons could turn those cities to ash, could make the Velthari feel a fraction of the pain they had inflicted on humanity. But that was not why he had come. "Open a channel," he ordered. "It's time to end this." The human fleet hung in orbit above Velthar Prime like a crown of steel and fire. 300 warships, each one carrying weapons that could level cities, surrounded the heart of the Dominion. On the planet below, billions of Velthari looked up at the sky and waited for death. Admiral Marcus Chen stood at the center of his bridge. Around him, officers from a dozen species worked their stations in focused silence. They had fought together, bled together, and built something extraordinary from nothing. Now they waited for his order. Chen could destroy Velthar Prime. Every officer on his bridge knew it. The Velthari knew it. The galaxy knew it. One command, and the species that had condemned humanity to death would face extinction themselves. Instead, Chen opened a communication channel. "People of Velthar Prime," he announced. His voice was broadcast across the entire planet, reaching every home, every shelter, every fearful citizen. 5 years ago, your leaders condemned my species to die. They framed us for crimes we did not commit. They took our homes, our colonies, and our futures. He paused, letting the words settle. We did not die. We survived. We grew stronger. And now we have returned with the power to repay every injustice done to us. Another pause. But that is not why we are here. In his palace, High Counselor Merrick's listened to the broadcast with growing confusion. This was not how conquerors spoke. This was not the behavior of a species seeking revenge. We came for justice, Chen continued, not revenge. Your leaders betrayed you as surely as they betrayed us. They built an empire on lies and cruelty. They told you that other species were inferior, that only the Velthari deserved to rule. These lies served only one purpose: to keep them in power. Across the planet, Velthari citizens exchanged uncertain glances. Some had always doubted the official stories. Others were hearing these accusations for the first time. "We offer you a choice," Chen said. "The same choice your leaders never offered us. Surrender the criminals who orchestrated our exile, and we will spare your world. Your people will not be punished for the sins of your rulers. This is our promise." Merrick slammed his fist against his throne. "Lies. Human lies. They will destroy us the moment we lower our defenses." But his advisors were no longer listening. His guards were no longer standing at attention. Throughout the palace, Velthari officers were receiving communications from family members, from friends, from citizens who had seen the evidence of their government's crimes. "High Counselor," the captain of his guard said quietly, "the people are demanding answers. They want to know if the accusations are true. Of course they're not true. I am the rightful ruler of the Dominion. I do not answer to mobs or human invaders." The captain's expression did not change. "Then you will not mind presenting your defense to a proper tribunal." Before Merrick could respond, his guards seized him. He struggled, screamed, threatened them with terrible punishment, but his power had been built on fear, and fear had its limits. When the truth became undeniable, fear turned to anger, and that anger now turned against him. Merrick was delivered to Alina Vasquez in chains. She stood in the plaza of Velthar Prime's capital city, surrounded by representatives of the Haven Collective. Human, Vryn, Shalkai, Morave, and a dozen other species watched as the architect of their suffering was brought before them. "High Counselor Merrick," Alina said calmly, "you are charged with conspiracy to commit genocide, fabrication of evidence, and abuse of power resulting in the deaths of millions. How do you respond?" Merrick's golden scales had lost their shine. His proud bearing had collapsed into something small and bitter. "I did what was necessary to protect my people from your kind. Humans are a plague. You breed too fast, spread too far, ask too many questions. You had to be stopped. And the evidence you fabricated? The colonies you seized? The families you tore apart? Necessary sacrifices. The strong must control the weak. This is the natural order of the galaxy." Alina nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty. It makes this easier." The trial was broadcast across the galaxy. For 3 days, evidence was presented, testimony was heard, and the full scope of Merrick's crimes was revealed. He offered no defense except contempt. He showed no remorse except regret that his plan had failed. The verdict was unanimous. Guilty on all charges, but the sentence was not death. Alina announced it herself, standing before the assembled representatives of 100 worlds. "Merrick will spend the rest of his life in exile," she declared. "In the dead zone that he condemned humanity to, he will live among the ruins and radiation, the dying stars and hostile remnants. Perhaps there, far from his palace and his power, he will finally understand what he did to us." Merrick screamed his fury as he was dragged away. He cursed humanity, cursed the collective, cursed every species that had betrayed him. His voice faded into silence as the shuttle carried him toward his new prison. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy transformed. The old council was dissolved. A new galactic assembly took its place, built on principles that Alina had outlined in her final address. "We could have built an empire," she told the gathered representatives. "We could have done to others what was done to us. But empire is a trap. It requires constant conquest, constant oppression, constant fear to maintain. That is no future worth fighting for." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of beings from species that had been enemies for centuries. "We survived the dead zone because we learned to cooperate. Humans, Vryn, Shalkai, Moravi, we shared what we had. We protected each other. We discovered that our differences made us stronger, not weaker. That is the future we offer to the galaxy." The Galactic Assembly was not perfect. Old hatreds did not disappear overnight. Disputes arose, compromises were needed, and progress was slow. But it was progress built on consent rather than conquest, on partnership rather than domination. Humanity took a seat on the assembly but refused to lead it. When asked why, Admiral Chen simply said, "Leadership is earned, not claimed. We'll prove ourselves through actions, not titles." Years passed. Haven Prime, once a desperate refuge in the dead zone, became a thriving trade hub. Ships from across the galaxy visited its stations, seeking the technology and wisdom that the exiled species had developed. The collective's reputation for fair dealing and fierce loyalty made it one of the most respected powers in known space. Elena Vasquez retired from politics and lived quietly on Haven Prime. She spent her days teaching young diplomats, writing her memoirs, and watching the community she had helped build flourish around her. One afternoon, her granddaughter Maya found her standing before the memorial wall. Thousands of names were carved into the black stone, the names of every human and allied being who had died during the exile and the war that followed. Grandmother Maya asked, "Why didn't we destroy the Velthri when we had the chance?" "They would have destroyed us." Lena knelt down to meet her granddaughter's eyes. "Because proving them wrong was always more powerful than proving them right." "I don't understand." Lena smiled gently. "The Velthri believed that humans were monsters, that we only understood violence and conquest. If we had destroyed them, we would have proved them right. Instead, we showed the galaxy what humans really are. Not perfect, not always kind, but capable of mercy even when mercy is hard." She stood and looked back at the names on the wall. "Every name here represents someone who believed we could be better than our enemies. We owe it to them to keep being better. That's how we honor their sacrifice. That's how we win forever, not just for one day." Maya took her grandmother's hand. Together, they walked away from the memorial as the artificial sun set over Haven Prime, casting long shadows across the plaza, where exiles had once gathered in desperation and now gathered in hope. The galaxy had been changed by humanity's return. Not through conquest, but through example. Not through destruction, but through determination, and somewhere in the dead zone. In a small cell on a forgotten station, an old Velthri who had once ruled an empire stared at dying stars and finally understood what he had never believed possible. Humanity had won, not by becoming monsters, by refusing to. Admiral Velcora stood on the bridge of her dying flagship and watched the stars burn. Behind her, 17 ships were all that remained of the Tesserae Confederation fleet. Ahead of her lay nothing but darkness and the cold emptiness of space. The war was over. They had lost for 300 years. Her people had fought against the dominion of Keth. They had won battles, has lost worlds, and buried more soldiers than she could count. Now the Dominion fleet was coming, and there was nowhere left to run. "Admiral," her navigator said, his voice shaking, "the Dominion will intercept us in 6 hours. We cannot outrun them." Velcora closed her 4 eyes and let out a slow breath. Her blue skin had grown pale over the past weeks. Sleep had become a stranger to her. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the faces of the dead. "Show me our options," she said quietly. The navigator pulled up a star map. It glowed in the dim light of the bridge. Most of the galaxy was marked in red, showing Dominion territory. A few scattered points of yellow showed neutral zones, but they were too far away. Her ships would never make it. Then she saw it, a tiny dot at the edge of the map, unmarked and alone. "What is that system?" she asked. The navigator's hands began to tremble. "Admiral, that is the Sol system. Earth." The entire bridge went silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and turned to look at the map. Fear spread across their faces like a shadow. Velcora had heard the stories just like everyone else in the galaxy. Every species knew about Earth. Every child learned the warning before they learned to count. A signal had been broadcasting from that small blue world for nearly 5 million years. It spoke in a language older than any civilization, and its message was always the same. Do not approach. Do not awaken. Do not forget. The Galactic Council had made it their oldest law. No ship could enter the Sol system. No probe could scan its planets. Earth was forbidden, and no one knew why. The Council's law, her second officer began. The Council abandoned us. Velcora cut him off. Her voice was hard. They watched the Dominion destroy our worlds and did nothing. Their laws mean nothing to me now. But Admiral, the ancient warning is a mystery that no one has ever solved. Velcora turned to face her crew. They looked at her with wide eyes, waiting for her decision. We have two choices. We can stay here and die fighting a battle we cannot win. Or we can jump to the Sol system and hope that whatever lies there is less dangerous than the Dominion fleet behind us. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum of the ship's engines and the quiet beeping of damaged systems. Her navigator swallowed hard. The species on Earth, the humans, they are primitive. They have not even discovered faster than light travel. They cannot help us, and perhaps they will not hurt us either, Velcora replied. Set the course. We jump in 10 minutes. The fleet moved through space like wounded animals, their engines struggling and their shields flickering. When the jump drives activated, Velcora felt the familiar pull of folded space wrap around her ship. For a moment, everything went white. Then they emerged near Earth. The blue planet hung in the darkness like a precious jewel. White clouds swirled across its surface. Green and brown land masses poked through vast oceans. It was beautiful in a way that made Velcora's heart ache. Her sensors began to pick up signals from the planet below. Radio waves, television broadcasts, satellite communications. The humans were talking to each other, completely unaware that alien ships had just appeared in their sky. Admiral, her science officer, reported these humans are remarkably primitive. Chemical rockets, basic nuclear technology. They have not even established colonies on their own moon. Velcora frowned. This made no sense. Why would the galaxy's oldest warning protect such a young species? What were the ancients so afraid of? Before she could ask another question, alarms began to scream across every ship in her fleet. Dominion ships, her navigator shouted. They followed us through the jump. Velcora spun around. On her view screen, dozens of Dominion warships appeared in flashes of light. Lord Malaker's flagship led them, its weapons already glowing with power. All ships, raise shields and prepare to. She never finished the sentence. Every light on her bridge went dark. Every console died. Every engine stopped. In the space of a single heartbeat, her entire fleet lost all power. Through her view screen, she could see the Dominion ships suffering the same fate. Their weapons went silent. Their engines went cold. Both fleets hung frozen in space, completely helpless. Then the ocean below them began to glow. A light rose from the depths of Earth's largest ocean, a light so bright that Velcora had to shield her eyes. It was not fire. It was not radiation. It was something else. Something ancient and vast and impossibly powerful. Every screen on her ship flickered back to life. But they did not show her systems. They showed a symbol, a shape that her people had found carved into ruins across 100 dead worlds. The mark of the first walkers, the civilization that had existed before all others, the ones who had vanished billions of years ago. Then a voice spoke. It did not come through the speakers. It came through everything, through the walls and the air and the minds of every living being in both fleets. It spoke in the Tessari language. It spoke in the Dominion tongue. It spoke in every language that had ever existed, all at once, all perfectly clear. You have come to the cradle, the voice said. Its tone was calm, but carried weight that pressed against Velcora's very soul. State your intent, or be unmade. Velcora tried to speak, but no words came out. Beside her, her officers stood frozen in terror. On the Dominion ships, she knew that warriors who had never known fear were feeling it for the first time. Below them, Earth continued to spin, peaceful and quiet. Its billions of humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware that something older than their world had just awakened, and high above them, the two fleets hung in perfect silence. Waiting for judgment, the world changed in a single morning. Dr. Yuna Chen was drinking her third cup of coffee when the news broke. She was aboard the research vessel Pacific Dream, floating above the Mariana Trench, studying geological formations on the ocean floor. It was supposed to be a quiet Tuesday. Then the sky filled with alien ships, and quiet Tuesdays became a thing of the past. "Are you seeing this?" her colleague shouted from across the deck. Everyone had gathered around a small television screen. Watching the news with wide eyes and open mouths, Una pushed through the crowd and felt her heart stop. The footage showed massive ships hanging in the sky above every major city. Military jets circled them, but did not attack. World leaders were giving emergency broadcasts, telling people to stay calm. But their voices shook with fear. Then the ships went dark. Every single one of them, alien and all, simply stopped moving. They hung in the air like dead things, their lights gone, their engines silent. No one knew why. Una was about to speak when the ocean beneath their ship began to glow. "What in the world?" someone whispered. The light came from deep below, rising through the water like a second sun. It was blue and gold in colors that Una had no name for. It grew brighter and brighter until she had to close her eyes against it. When she opened them again, she saw something impossible. A structure was rising from the trench. It was not made of metal or stone. It seemed to shift and change, solid one moment and liquid the next. It was enormous, larger than any building Una had ever seen, and it moved through the water as easily as a fish. The crew of the Pacific Dream screamed and ran. Engines roared to life as the captain tried to steer them away. But Una could not move. Something held her in place, not with force, but with a feeling. A gentle pull that told her she was meant to be here. A doorway opened in the side of the structure. Light poured out from within. "Dr. Chen," a voice said inside her mind. It was warm and ancient and impossibly kind. "Please come inside. There is much to discuss." Una's feet moved on their own. She walked across the deck, past her screaming colleagues, and stepped off the ship onto a bridge of light that formed beneath her feet. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt calm. Like a child coming home after a long journey. The doorway closed behind her. Inside, the structure was vast and empty. The walls glowed with soft light, and the air smelled like rain and flowers and something older than memory. Una walked forward until she reached a chamber at the heart of the structure. There, floating in the center of the room, was a sphere of pure energy. It pulsed like a heartbeat, slow and steady and eternal.
"What are you?"
Una asked. Her voice sounded small in the enormous space. "I am the Guardian," the voice replied. It came from everywhere and nowhere. "I was placed here for 0.7 million years ago by those your scientists call the First Walkers. My purpose is to watch over your world and protect your species until you are ready." "Ready for what?" The sphere pulsed brighter. "To claim your inheritance." Then the visions began. Una saw the galaxy as it was billions of years ago. She saw the first walkers, beings of light and thought, who had seeded life across 1,000 worlds. They were wise and powerful and very, very old, but they were also afraid. The first walkers had looked into the future and seen something that filled them with both terror and hope. They saw a small blue planet at the edge of the galaxy. They saw a species that did not yet exist. A species that would evolve from simple creatures into something remarkable. Humans, the Guardian explained, were unlike any species the first walkers had ever seen. Other races had strength. Others had intelligence. Others had technology. But humans had something else. Something the first walkers called the gift. It was the ability to become anything. Humans could adapt to any environment. They could master any skill. They could dream of impossible things and then make those things real. Their potential had no limit. And that was what frightened the first walkers. They knew that one day humans would spread across the galaxy. They would meet other species. And what happened then would depend entirely on what kind of people they chose to become. "So they left you here," Una whispered. "To protect us. To protect everyone," the Guardian corrected. "Including you from yourselves. I have stopped 17 extinction events that your historians never recorded. I have turned away 3 alien invasions before your species invented writing. I have watched you grow from caves to cities, from fire to atoms, from dreams to reality. And now there are ships in your sky. One fleet comes seeking shelter. The other comes seeking destruction. Both have awakened me from my long sleep. And I must ask you a question, Dr. Chen. A question that will decide the future of your species. The Guardian's light dimmed slightly, and Yuna felt the weight of its attention focus entirely on her. Would you have me protect you forever? I can destroy those fleets with a thought. I can hide your world behind walls of force that no weapon can break. Your people could live in safety for 1,000,000 years, never knowing war, never facing danger. Yuna opened her mouth to say yes. Of course she wanted safety. Of course she wanted protection. What sane person would not? But then she stopped. She thought about human history. She thought about all the times her people had faced impossible challenges and found ways to overcome them. She thought about the courage of explorers and the brilliance of scientists, and the stubborn determination that had carried humanity from the savannas of Africa to the surface of the moon. Humans had never grown stronger by hiding from danger. They had grown stronger by facing it. No, she said. Her voice was steady now. We speak for ourselves. We have always spoken for ourselves. The Guardian was silent for a long moment. Then its light blazed brighter than ever before. Then let us begin, it said. Your inheritance awaits. Above the Pacific Dream, the alien ship still hung frozen in space. On his flagship, Lord Malachar of the Dominion stared at Earth with growing rage. He did not know what was happening below those clouds, but he knew that something was changing, something that would shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. Dr. Yuna. Chen's voice reached every human on the planet at the same moment. It came through televisions and radios and phones. It came through speakers in shopping malls and airports and hospitals. It even came through devices that were turned off. Every person on Earth heard the same words at the same time. We speak for ourselves. We have always spoken for ourselves. And the ground began to tremble. In the Sahara Desert, sand dunes collapsed as something ancient rose from beneath them. In Antarctica, ice sheets cracked apart to reveal structures that had been hidden for millions of years. In mountain ranges across the world, caverns opened that no human had ever seen. The inheritance of the first, Walkers, was awakening. World leaders watched in stunned silence as reports flooded in from every continent. The structures were not weapons. They were not warships. They were libraries, vast collections of knowledge left behind by a civilization that had died before life on. Earth had crawled out of the oceans within hours. Human scientists were inside the structures, their eyes wide with wonder. What they found changed everything. The first walkers had left behind the secrets of the universe. They had left instructions for building engines that could fold space and travel between stars and moments. They had left blueprints for energy sources that made nuclear power look like candles in the wind. They had left medical knowledge that could cure every disease known to humanity. And they had left one thing more. They had left a gift that allowed humans to understand any language in the galaxy. It was not a machine or a device. It was a pattern, a way of thinking that, once learned, opened the door to communication with any intelligent species. The first walkers had known that humanity's greatest power was not strength or technology. It was the ability to connect with others. In New York, London, Beijing, and every capital city on Earth. Emergency meetings were called. Leaders who had been enemies for generations sat down together and faced a simple truth. The old divisions no longer mattered. Humanity was no longer alone, and the galaxy was not friendly. We need to send someone up there, the American president said. Someone to speak for all of us. But who? Asked the Chinese premier. Who can represent the entire human race? The answer came from an unexpected place. James Okonkwo had been born in a refugee camp in Kenya. His parents had fled war and famine, carrying nothing but hope and their young son. Against all odds, James had survived. He had studied, worked, and eventually become one of the world's most respected diplomats. He had negotiated peace in conflicts that everyone said were impossible to solve. Now he stepped forward and volunteered for a mission that no human had ever attempted. I will go, he said simply. I have spent my life building bridges between people who thought they could never understand each other. Perhaps I can build one more. There was only one problem. Humanity had no ships capable of reaching orbit. The First Walker knowledge was still being translated. It would take months, maybe years, to build proper spacecraft. We do not have months, someone said. The Dominion fleet is growing impatient. It was true. High above Earth, Lord Malachar had recovered from his shock. His ships were still powerless, held frozen by the Guardian's will, but he could still speak. His demands echoed across all frequencies. Primitives, he roared, surrender the Tessari refugees immediately, or I will burn your world to ash the moment I am free. Ah! But humanity was not listening to him. They were too busy performing a miracle. In a research facility in Japan, scientists worked without sleep. They had the first Walker blueprints. They had the knowledge of how fold space engines worked. And they had something the first Walkers had never counted on: human determination. In 3 days, they built a ship. It was not pretty. It was not elegant. It was held together with hope and desperation and technology that the engineers barely understood. But when they activated its engine, it rose into the sky like a silver arrow, carrying Ambassador James Okonkwo toward the stars. Impossible, Admiral Velcora whispered from her frozen ship as she watched the human vessel approach. They built a starship in 3 days. Her science officer checked his instruments twice before answering. It appears so, Admiral. The energy signature matches First Walker technology, but the construction is entirely human. How? They were primitives a week ago, perhaps her science officer said slowly. They were never truly primitive. Perhaps they were simply waiting. Lord Malachar laughed when he saw the single human ship approaching his fleet. It was tiny compared to his warships. Insect-facing dragons? One ship? He mocked over the communication channel. One ship and one ambassador? Is this how humanity greets the Dominion? But Admiral Velcora was not laughing. She had ordered her crew to search the oldest historical archives, records that her people had kept for hundreds of thousands of years. What she found made her blood run cold. My lord, she broadcast to Malachar, her voice trembling. I must warn you. The First Walkers did not leave a guardian to protect humans from the galaxy. Then why did they leave it? Malachar demanded. Velcora swallowed hard. They left it to give the galaxy time to prepare for humans. For a moment, there was only silence. Then James Okonkwo's ship docked with the Dominion flagship. A single human stepped aboard to face an empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds. He carried no weapons. He wore no armor. He had only his voice and his courage and the hope of an entire world riding on his shoulders. The fate of Earth, perhaps the galaxy itself. Now rested in his hands, Ambassador James, Kwankye walked through the corridors of the Dominion flagship alone. Armed guards surrounded him on all sides. Their weapons were pointed at his chest. Their eyes burned with contempt for this primitive creature who dared to board their vessel. But James did not look at them. He looked straight ahead, his back straight, and his head held high. He had faced worse in his life. He had stood in the ruins of his childhood home after soldiers burned it to the ground. He had buried friends who died from diseases that could have been cured if anyone had cared enough to try. He had negotiated with warlords who killed for sport. This was just another challenge. Another bridge to build. The guards led him to the command deck, where Lord Malachar waited on his throne. The Dominion commander was massive, nearly 3 meters tall, with scales like polished obsidian and eyes like burning coals. His claws could tear through steel. His voice could shake mountains. He looked at James the way a giant might look at an insect. So, Malachar said, his words dripping with amusement, this is humanity's champion. A single soft creature with no weapons, no armor, and no hope. I do not need weapons, James replied calmly. I did not come here to fight. Then why did you come? To beg for mercy? To talk. Malachar laughed. It was an ugly sound, full of cruelty. Talk? The Dominion does not talk with lesser species. We conquer. We rule. We have burned 1,000 civilizations to dust. What could a primitive like you possibly say that would matter to us? James smiled slightly. May I show you something, Lord Malachor? The Dominion commander waved his claw dismissively. Amuse me if you can. James reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device, a translator built from First Walker technology. He activated it, and suddenly his voice was broadcast not just to the command deck, but to every ship in the Dominion fleet. To every Dominion world? To every soldier and citizen across their entire empire, Malachor roared with fury. What is this? Guards, stop him. But the guards did not move. They were listening, and James began to speak. He did not speak of war or conquest or power. He spoke of something simpler. He spoke of his childhood in the refugee camp, of nights spent hungry and cold, of watching his mother cry because she could not feed her children. He spoke of the kind strangers who shared their food even when they had little. He spoke of teachers who taught him to read by candlelight and doctors who worked without pay. He spoke of humanity. We are not a perfect species, he admitted. We have made terrible mistakes. We have fought wars over land and resources and ideas. We have hurt each other in ways that still bring us shame. He paused, and his voice grew stronger. But we have also learned. Every generation, we grow a little wiser. Every century, we become a little kinder. We build schools where there were battlefields. We plant gardens where there were graves. We teach our children that the strangest stranger is still a person worthy of love. Across Dominion space, soldiers lowered their weapons and listened. Citizens gathered in public squares to hear the strange voice from the forbidden world. Children stopped their games and looked up at the sky. I know what you have been told about war, James continued. You have been told that it brings glory, that conquest makes you strong, that mercy is weakness. But I ask you to look at your own lives. Think of your families. Think of your children. Think of the future you want for them. He stepped closer to Lord Malachor, close enough to touch. Do you want them to grow up in a galaxy of endless war? Do you want them to know nothing but blood and fire and fear? Or do you want them to have something better? Something peaceful? Something kind? Silence. Malachor roared. His claw shot out and closed around James's throat. You think pretty words can stop me? You think speeches can defeat the Dominion? James could barely breathe, but he managed to speak. I think that even the mightiest empire is made of people, and people can change. Malachor squeezed tighter. James felt his vision darkened, but across the command deck, something was happening. The guards were looking at each other. Some of them had tears in their eyes. One officer stepped forward, her hand raised. My lord, she said hesitantly. Perhaps we should listen. Silence. Malachor threw James to the ground and drew his blade. This primitive has infected you with weakness. I will show you what the Dominion does to our enemies. He raised his blade and brought it down. James Okonkwo died with his eyes open. Looking up at the stars he had dreamed of reaching since he was a child in a dusty camp, but his death was not the end. It was a beginning. Across the Dominion fleet, soldiers watched their commander kill an unarmed man who had come in peace. They saw the contrast between James's courage and Malachor's cruelty. They remembered the words that had touched something deep inside them, and they began to whisper. Admiral Velcro, watching from her frozen ship, made a decision. She ordered her communications officer to record everything that had happened and broadcast it to the Galactic Council. To neutral worlds, to anyone who would listen, the video spread like fire through the galaxy. Within hours, billions of beings had seen a human ambassador walk into the heart of an empire and speak truth to power. They had seen him die without raising a hand in violence, and they had seen the reactions of the Dominion soldiers who listened to him. The doubt in their eyes, the hesitation in their movements, the cracks forming in the foundation of an empire that had seemed unbreakable. On Earth, people wept for James Okonkwo. They lit candles and held vigils and mourned the man who had given his life for a chance at peace. Then the Guardian spoke for the last time. My purpose is complete. Its voice echoed across the planet. Humanity has chosen their path. You did not hide. You did not fight. You sent your best to speak for you, and he planted seeds that will grow for generations. The Guardian's light began to fade. But know this, my children. What your ambassador did today will never be forgotten. The galaxy will learn what the first walkers always knew. Humans do not conquer worlds. The light dimmed further, retreating into the depths. You conquer hearts. Then the Guardian went silent. Its long watch finally ended, and across the void, in the halls of power and the homes of ordinary people, the galaxy held its breath and wondered what humanity would do next. 1 year had passed since the day the sky changed. Dr. Yuna. Chen stood on the observation deck of the starship Unity and watched Earth shrink behind her. The blue planet that had been her home looked so small now, so fragile against the endless darkness of space. But it was no longer alone. Beside Earth hung dozens of ships from a dozen different worlds. Trading vessels and diplomatic cruisers and science ships had come from across the galaxy. To visit the world that had been forbidden for so long, the ancient warning was silent now, and the universe was curious about the species it had been told to fear. Chun, a voice said behind her. We will arrive at the council station in 3 hours. Yuna turned to see Admiral Velcora standing in the doorway. The Tesseri commander had changed in the past year. The weariness had left her eyes. She smiled more often now. Leading the first joint human Tessari. Diplomatic mission had given her something she thought she had lost forever. Hope. Thank you, Admiral, Yuna said. Is the delegation ready? They are. Though I must admit, they are nervous. The Galactic Council has not invited a new species to address them in over 50,000 years. Psst. Yuna nodded. She understood the weight of this moment. The Council was made up of the galaxy's oldest and most powerful civilizations. They had created the warning about Earth. They had watched humanity from afar, and waited for the day when the primitive species would prove itself worthy of attention. That day had come, but not in the way anyone expected. The Dominion of Keth had not attacked Earth. In fact, the Dominion barely existed anymore. Lord Malachar had been overthrown by his own officers just weeks after he killed Ambassador Okonkwo. The video of his cruelty and the ambassador's courage had spread to every corner of the empire. Citizens who had been silent for centuries began to speak. Soldiers who had followed orders without question began to ask why. Reform movements sprang up on world after world, demanding change, demanding something better than endless war. The Dominion did not fall overnight. Empires never do. But it was changing. It was cracking along lines that had been invisible until a single human voice made them visible. James Okonkwo had planted seeds. Now those seeds were growing. The Unity dropped out of fold space near the council station. It was enormous, a structure the size of a small moon built in an age when the galaxy was young. Thousands of ships surrounded it, representing every major civilization known to exist. Yuna took a deep breath and prepared to face them. The council chamber was ancient and beautiful. Light filtered through crystal windows that showed a view of distant stars. Seats rose in tiers around a central platform filled with beings of every shape and size and color. Some breathed air. Some breathed liquid. Some did not breathe at all. The eldest counselor sat at the highest point. It was a being of pure light. One of the last survivors of a species that had walked the galaxy when Earth was still a ball of molten rock. Its voice echoed through the chamber like distant thunder. Humanity, it said. For 4.7 million years, we have waited for this moment. We have watched you from afar. We have feared what you might become. Yuna stepped onto the central platform. She was alone, carrying nothing but her voice and the weight of her world's hopes. And now the counselor continued, you have come to us. You have built ships from ancient knowledge. You have traveled the void between stars. What do you want from the galaxy, humans? What are your demands? This was the moment that would define humanity's future. Every being in the chamber leaned forward, waiting for the answer. They expected threats. They expected ultimatums. They expected the conquest that the first walkers had feared so long ago. Instead, Yuna smiled softly and began to speak. We want to learn, she said. Your people have existed for millions of years. You have discovered wonders that we cannot imagine. We want to learn from you. The chamber stirred with surprise. We also want to share, Una continued. Humanity has something to offer. Our art, our music, our stories, our stubborn determination. Our ability to hope when hope seems foolish. Our capacity to love strangers and find family in the most unexpected places. She looked up at the ancient counselor. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We have seen what empires become. We have been conquerors and slaves. We have burned and built. And we have learned that the civilizations that endure are not the ones that take. They are the ones. That gives silence filled the chamber. The counselor's light flickered in what might have been confusion. You have the first walker technology, it said slowly. You could build weapons that would make you unstoppable. Why would you choose this path? Una thought of James Okonkwo, who had walked into the heart of darkness armed with nothing but words. She thought of the guardian who had watched over humanity for millions of years. She thought of every human who had ever chosen kindness over cruelty, connection over conquest. Because we know who we want to be, she answered. The counselor was silent for a long moment. Then, slowly, its light began to brighten. The first walkers left a warning, it said. They told us to fear humanity, but I think perhaps they were wrong. I think they should have told us to hope. It raised its voice so that every being in the chamber could hear. Let it be recorded. Humanity has come to the galaxy not as conquerors, but as friends. Let those who wish to know them come to Earth. Let those who wish to teach them share their knowledge. And let us see what this species becomes when given the chance to grow. One by one, representatives from across the galaxy rose to their feet. They did not cheer or applaud. Instead, they bowed their heads in acknowledgement. It was a gesture of respect. It was offered to a species that had earned something far more valuable than fear. They had earned trust. 6 months later, Una stood before the Guardian's resting place. The structure still floated in the Pacific, but it was quiet now, dormant, its purpose complete. She had come alone, wanting to say goodbye. Thank you, she whispered to the silence. For watching over us? For believing we could be something more than our worst moments? The structure did not respond. She had not expected it to. But as she turned to leave, she noticed something she had not seen before. Words had been carved into the surface of the structure, written in every human language that had ever existed. They glowed faintly in the light of the setting sun. Una read them, and tears rolled down her cheeks. You were worth the wait. Far above Earth, human ships flew alongside vessels from 100 different worlds. Trade routes were opening. Cultural exchanges were beginning. Scientists were sharing discoveries that would have taken millennia to achieve alone and across the void. In corners of the galaxy that humans had never heard of, beings who had watched the footage of Ambassador Okonkwo began to ask questions. They began to dream of something different. They began to hope the galaxy was changing, not through conquest, not through war, not through the power that the first walkers had feared, through something simpler, something stronger, through the human heart.